Hey, Roosters. Welcome back to Rooster Booster Time. This is episode 13, and we have a special guest today with us is Mike Brown. He is a current Rooster, been with the team for 2 years. I've actually had to get to know Mike throughout the season, which is really nice. Trips he didn't make or when he was injured and just took the time to sit next to me pre-matches and stuff. So it's very nice to have you here, Mike. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks, Scott.
And we're just going to do our regular interview, guys. You've seen it before. I've done it with Dillon. I've done it with Will. We're just going to ask him some straightforward questions, pretty much about, sports in general, his life in sports. The first question I actually have, Mike, is you had a unique situation during this quarantine, this COVID situation, where you actually got married. Congratulations. Yeah. And just talk about how it went. I mean, it looked good from what I saw. So just expand on that.
Yeah, how we planned the wedding originally was supposed to be, of course, it's around rugby. It was during our bye week and our supposed bye week. So we had it all planned and everything for friends and family, teammates show up. But unfortunately with the COVID situation, we, had to adjust our venue to one of our, the pastor who was marrying us. So the date was important to us. We wanted to get married. So we weren't just going to let, the COVID virus, ruin our day. So we just went along with it. There was like 4 people there, and then the rest were on Zoom and social distancing, of course. And we went along with it. I think, I think people would just really wanted positivity at the time and something to root for. So a lot of people who watched it or heard about it were just really positive and just, not a lot of people had positive news at the time. So we were glad we did it.
Yeah, no, it looked great. I was following Chris Matina's Instagram stories, was chronicling your wedding, and he did the typical. He was wearing all of his uppers and then had boxers on the bottom, and then he showed you the boxers, which I was like, okay, maybe that's a little too much, Chris. But congratulations, and that's cool. It's a unique thing. That's something you guys are certainly going to remember for the rest of your lives, and maybe. I being married myself and having all the fanfare, and my wife wanted a large wedding, so that's what we did, obviously. I think it's cool to do it the other way too. I mean, circumstances are circumstances, and to be honest, it's about you and your wife, becoming a eternal partnership. So it looked great to me. I'm glad you guys got to do it, and I think it was a good choice in the end.
Thanks, yeah, it was it was not what we imagined, but you can always you always want to, you could do the ceremony later, and we'll definitely remember it.
So you're still in New York City currently?
Yep. Yeah, still in Manhattan. Yep.
And you mentioned previously that your wife was working from home. So what do you do now? I mean, staying in shape, eating. How do you stay healthy and fit during this quarantine?
Yeah, just during this time, you have 2 ways to look at it. You can be really sad, depressed about it, or you can take your punches and get right back up. So just been staying active, doing stuff that I normally wouldn't do. Learning this time, be like, you know what, I have all this extra time, because usually just keep on playing rugby. You don't have so much time to just absolutely just work on a lot of weaknesses. So now I can actually work on those and just take advantage of that time. I have a lot of free time now, obviously. So been doing a lot more just stuff, working on coaching wise, looking at film. Always want to make sure that I'm doing, 1 or 2 things a day to keep my brain just active, and then just, mentally, spiritually unwind too. So just been working out and, more time with the wife.
Yeah, I mean, you could go stir crazy just being in your own head about it. It's funny. A buddy of mine was talking to Nick Feeks, and he was saying that slowly Nola Gold is just, they're putting together like a 4-guy workout group, and then so like on Mondays him and 3 other guys work out together, and then on Tuesdays it's another group, and then the week after that they switch it, just so the guys kind of stay in tune. But I think it's easier for them because most of the Rooney guys have kind of left the city, the people who don't live there year round, right?
Yeah, most of the boys left the city, or even guys like Nate Brakely or Anthony Perry who live in Manhattan. They went up to Vermont or New Hampshire. So I think there's only a couple of us with, there's only about a handful of us that are actually there. And most of those guys who are there are, working.
Yeah. We saw Connor Wallace-Sims in his great penthouse apartment while he was playing the virtual MLR. And that was
he definitely did that.
Exactly. That's exactly what I said.
I know.
And it definitely got the ball rolling with some comments. It was really funny. But I mean, so I think while quarantine obviously sucks, for the Rooney team, I think it's a little tougher because you have so many internationals. A lot of guys, have to go. James Rochford, knock on wood, first flight he took back to Ireland to get with his new family. We were all worried about him getting back. And then finally guys, like Will Leonard and Mark O'Keefe took their time and got there. So I think that's just one of the things New York sports is going to run into with rugby, because unlike NFL, NHL, we don't have quote unquote international players. Everybody stays in the United States generally for the off season. So I think it's definitely unique to rugby, but I don't think it's such a bad thing either. So my next question for you is, who is your sports hero? It doesn't have to be a rugby player. I mean, if it is a rugby player, that's cool. But who's your sports hero?
I was a big Tim Tebow, but a guy that sort of hypes me up now is Brian Dawkins. I love
the dog.
A lot of guys, before the game, I remember before the Houston game, I was talking to Kirk Hamilton, Robert Mesky. I was like, because Mike Vick 30 for 30 came out, and a bunch of us like to watch it. And I'm like, who always making plays is Brian Dawkins. And then we got this whole debate about Brian Dawkins, and I just love Brian Dawkins. He was always, he's the Wolverine, X Factor.
Yeah.
He always made the big play, always made the big hit. He was always energetic, always going crazy, and just always was prepared and willing to make the big play. So Brian Dawkins I love him. I love Brian Dawkins.
I love that answer. I love Brian Dawkins. I love any strong safety that's going to come in and just wallop somebody, whether it's on the run or somebody coming across with that flag route. Boom, big hit. I love it. I coach youth football, and I tell my kids all the time, if you see a guy looking up for a ball, as soon as his hands touch that ball, just boom.
Always wasn't afraid to fail. Always made the big play. No. That's what I really liked about him.
Yeah, no, I love that pick. I hate Philly, but I love that pick.
Yeah.
My wife is Philly. Their whole side's Philly fans, and I'm not even a New York fan for football. I'm actually a Green Bay fan, but there's just a general hate in Philly, which goes to, what? I'm going to ask you a question that's kind of off my list. Do you think Philly is a good market to have an MLR team?
Philly's a good market to have an MLR team. They did have that stadium for the college CRCs that they get a lot. Mm-hmm. Penn State's a good college program with Kutztown. I just don't think the club's there, but it's, how it all works. It's just all about where the money's at. So if people are willing to pony up, then, they have a lot of money, like the Austin owner and the LA owner, then it's probably going to be a good market, and people are going to show up. It would be closer to, DC and New York and Boston. So yeah, it could be. You need a right situation. You need someone, ultimately who has the money. Mm-hmm.
It's funny because you talk about the CRC. I mean, they've had that event there for years. I went down. It's not actually in Philly. It's, oh God, I forgot what the town is. Watched Saracens play, and it's a sellout crowd. And it was a relatively smaller stadium. I think the big question with Philly is, if they get a team, are they going to do this, silence for the kicker, quote unquote? That's actually a big deal among the MLR fans. Personally,
how to do Philly fans anything. You're not allowed to tell them to do anything. That's when they get mad.
Yeah, and to be honest, personally, I feel like the MLR should build their own culture. It doesn't have to be respect, quote unquote, for the kicker. Because listen, NFL kickers have to do it with 80,000 fans. So, we have a couple thousand fans. If I'm not saying go out there and, talk about his mom, but if you're going to boo, I think it's socially acceptable to boo in American rugby. But that's my opinion.
Each league I think has to have their own identity, and you shouldn't just do the same thing over and over. So, if it's American culture, then there we go. There's a reason why we left Britain in the first place, right?
And not to follow their Premiership rugby law.
Yeah.
So my next question is, what is your favorite sports movie?
Sports movie. I love Remember the Titans. I love that Denzel, and just I could watch that over and over. It was great. Strong side, weak side. Brings people together. I think there's a lot of good concepts in it. Just as growing up, or just a lot of teammate aspects of it and working together. That's a lot about life too. And even with Rooney, you have so many people from different cultures in there. So I think that just is a very good movie, and it's a fun movie to watch.
That's a great pick. I think Will Burke and Dillon Fawcett both had that as on their list of movies they like to watch, sports related. Seriously, it's it's good. You guys are all on the same page, so we see it happen on the field. So it's good to know that you can do it outside of that too. I'm going with the sports theme here. What's your favorite sports quote? This is a tough one because I know you haven't prepared for any of these questions. But favorite sports quote?
Like I said, I think I sort of mentioned on Tebow. I think it's good for this time too. I'm not too sure what my future holds, but I know who holds my future. So especially during this time, we don't know what's going on. We discuss who knows what's going on, right? So I believe in God, and that's a big part of my life. So for me during that time, especially people look at maybe a rugby player's life, and they just see the top of the iceberg. They don't see what anything below. All the trials and tribulations, or just in life in general, with people in general. So that's why you shouldn't judge a person from the outside. You don't know what they've been through. So for that, and just an entire my rugby situation, things change quickly. So that's sort of a quote that I sort of rely on.
Nice. I'm a Tim Tebow fan. It's great what he does with his foundation, where he has that international prom night for special needs kids who don't get to go to prom. My wife actually does kind of the same thing in her organization, so it's good to see it on like a big global scale, where these kids who don't have the opportunity. I mean, it's like, I think it was like 40 countries or something like that. Tim Tebow's foundation has this international prom, so it's great. I mean, he's a good spokesperson. He's a good guy. So yeah, I'm really with you on the Tim Tebow. And going back to sports, Michigan beat him as a sophomore in a bowl game, so I'm very happy about that too. I always rub that in people's faces.
Go blue.
Yeah, go blue, baby. I love it. So what is your favorite pre-match meal?
I'm just pretty basic. I usually like a lot of, I'm a big hot sauce guy, but I stay away from hot sauce before a game. I'm just normally just chicken and rice, really, maybe a salad. I sort of stay kind of light, and I always like to we have these caffeine gum pills that we sort of chew on. So that's sort of what I have before, to get a little excited like that.
My buddies in the Marines say they're in the MRE kits. When you get the MRE, they have the caffeine gum. He goes, they love it.
But all the boys love it. All the boys love it too. It's good.
That's great. Oh, definitely. It's funny when I asked that question, because Dillon Fawcett was my first interview. I was expecting I don't know, just well balanced, the typical thing. And he's like, well, I do intermittent fasting, so it depends on what time the match is. And I was like, oh, because if the match is early in the day, it kind of screws up the way I do my diet. And I'm like, I could see that. And he goes, so usually it's one of those things where I hope it's kind of in the afternoon. That way I could eat what I normally eat and then have a quick beer at the social. He goes, if it's at night, I'm totally screwed. But yeah, no, that's yeah. I mean, it's sensible eating. I think everybody knows, and not just professionally. I think guys do this now in the club scene, all the way down to high school level. Having that overall health conscious approach as an athlete, and now that you're learning it back as a high schooler, it's easier to go into college or the pros or club scene and say, hey, I can continue this and do very well with it. Yeah. If you could play another professional sport, what would it be?
I mean, oh, jeez. I love the NFL, like I said. I'm big, I know you're a Pac-12 Lions fan. I haven't had much success. Oh. My buddies and I, we all watch the draft on the Zoom. So growing up in Michigan, big NFL guy. So, I'd be NFL. Hopefully a Lions quarterback,
taking them to a hot 8-8 record.
Hey, they would take that in Detroit.
Listen, that makes the playoffs with the new playoff organization. They get another, they get another shot at it. So any given Sunday, man, trust me.
NFL hope the teams.
so NFL, so not based on your current fighting height or weight, but ideally, what position would you want to play in the NFL?
If I was position. I mean, I would go back. I do like safety. I like watching safety plays like a Brian Dawkins or like a Ed Reed, Earl Thomas, like those guys, Palomalo, those guys, Ronnie Lott, like those guys. I love watching the highlights. That's sort of when I play Madden, I would be I usually go on safety. So like those are the type of guys like I like make the big hit, make the big play, because those guys are always everywhere, always making the big play.
I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to coach youth football this season, so I'm kind of getting antsy about it. And that's a real possibility, as we talked about. We don't know what we can't control the unknown, but it's still kind of getting me antsy. And it's For me, I've always been a big guy. I've always been a lineman type guy, so I would probably stick with lineman. I know it a lot. That's what I coach.
Yeah.
So it's fun to get the little kids to buy into the system a little bit. So here's another question, kind of off the record. So could if you could do one thing to help youth rugby in America, what would it be?
Youth rugby in America. I gotta get into schools. If I could, make sure every PE teacher has a rugby ball, then that's what I would do. Get in there, get in the youth, and then as long as that tied in with the school team, with the youth team, if it's flag rugby, there we go. If it's tackle or whatever, but like having tied in with the schools, that's what I would do.
Nice. I like that suggestion. I know you and Alex McDonald and they had a bunch of the other guys who weren't full time working go into the schools and just throw the ball around with the little kids. And I know up here there's a guy, Joel Venables, who's known in the New York rugby community.
Yeah.
Him and his wife, yeah, Big Joel. He he him and his wife got into our local middle school and they just started a rugby club, twice a week, an hour after school, and they just teach the rules. They show little videos, and then they throw the ball around and kind of teach the kids just to get into it. I still think that's a little too old. I think you have to get it even younger into the elementary schools, but I think eventually we'll have that cycle as the MLR starts to take off in year 4 and 5. If what I'm going through my list here, and this is a good one. I don't know if you have a particular answer for this. It might be just an ever changing thing depending on your mood. But what is your favorite song to listen to prior to a match?
I'm actually like not huge, but I like Avicii, a little Levels, Avicii going. I have a remix that sort of gets me hyped up. I used to be like a lot more, excited, hyped up, but more as I long through my career, sort of, I'll listen to music and everything, but not too close to the game. And then I'll sort of like look through my notes, sort of before the game and sort of my roles and responsibilities sort of remind me, because I think a lot of times you get too hyped up, and maybe this is just from experience. I learned this through experience. You get hyped up and then you forget, what your rules are. You're not unclear, and then, you miss your assignment on something. But once I, get back into the locker room and everything, I'm mostly just looking at my notes that I put in my notepad during the week and then sort of reminding my rules. But, Levels of Avicii, definitely something that, I get going.
Man, you've been hanging out with the Butcher quite often, apparently, because that was almost exactly his answer. He's like, I really don't listen to music. He goes, well, it depends on my mood. He goes, but right, an hour before match kickoff, I'm looking at my notes. I'm looking at everything we talked about the week before. So maybe it's a hooker thing, or maybe it's just a Rooney culture thing, which is nice to see that it is about professionalism. And I think that was the difference between year 1 last year and then the beginning of year 2. From an outsider's perspective, a lot of the guys came in already fit in shape. They didn't really have to lose that much weight or get into that much shape. They just kind of had to be rounded out. And they coached the new guys up about how you're supposed to be playing as a professional. I think last year there was a lot of hype because it was new to a lot of guys on the team. But this year there was more of just a mindset of we're going to go and we're going to work. And it was noticeable through the first 5 matches, at least to a fan like me. So it's nice to see.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, what do you think? I'm going off script here because I have you here and you have great opinions and because you've been with Rooney for 2 years and your role and being with the fans. What do you think we can do to create more rugby fans in the States besides going with the youth program? Do you think of television exposure? Do you think it's a matter of getting guys like Drew Mitchell to come over, or how do you think? What's your opinion?
I think something that just sort of hit my sort of realized. There's like this Facebook group, the Quarantine Ruggers on Facebook, where people are chugging beers. I think there's so many fans. There's so many rugby people in that group, but how many of that actually go watch rugby? There's a huge disconnect there, and that's something what the U.S. community sort of needs to realize. These people like to be on team. They're not competitive. Team environment. They may not be huge of the game, but you need to connect those people with the MLR. With the MLR watching it. So I think the crowd's actually there to start up. I think you're probably only hitting currently right now, if I had to guess, maybe 40% of your rugby population per market. But you need to, I think, connecting those people on Facebook that has, I forget the number of it. It's well over 300,000, and most of them are for the States. How do you connect those people into the MLR? So I think you just need to do a lot of community outreach, a lot of education, a lot of reaching with the clubs, the D3 clubs. That means, doing a coaching session with them to sort of connect with them, sharing the knowledge from them down. But that also comes with more resources. I know that MLR, it's a startup. So, you can't just do everything all at once. It's a process. Everyone realizes. But sort of having those, that coach education, so they have that connection and they have the knowledge. Because I think they do the same with England, right? So someone from the Wasps, they're in the Wasps, will come down to, whatever youth rugby or whatever D3 club in England would, they sort of learn, and there's their connection. Oh yeah, here you go. Your club gets 10 tickets right here, and then they show up or they pay for it, and sort of like a buy-in. You get coach education, and then you'll get tickets. You buy into the program or something like that. So I think connecting that, there's a lot out there. I think rugby community out there that the MLR hasn't hit, and a lot of its education missing. There's a lot of people out there, but like I said, it's not a diss to MLR, because I know all the guys in MLR and all the teams have so many things going on, and it's resources, what you got to do next. But eventually down the road, that's how you sort of solve it.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely correct in that. And I think one of the small things they did this season, at least for Rooney, I don't know if it affects some of the other MLR teams, but being in the New York area, you have like 7 huge rugby clubs. What day do they play on? Saturdays.
Yep.
So it's kind of tough to have a professional match schedule that, let's say, 1 p.m. on a Saturday, and then half your fan base is playing their own matches. So I know this particular season in 2020, we were going to have a lot of home matches on Sundays. And I think that a small change like that, where you can actually tell the guys to come over and actually watch, versus really struggling, because would you want to play on a whatever division club team you're on and then go to Brooklyn and watch a professional play? No, not really. You want to have the social, you want to go home, and you want to rest. So I think just a little change like that, and I think it's individually driven by each market, depending on how their culture is. Those things can bring those fans back into the fold. But definitely, I think you're right. With the resources eventually going down the road, I think you'll have guys like Mike Petrie, Chris Mattina, who coach. You could put them on a D2 or D3 team just for a week and say, hey, we're going to try this stratagem of practicing, see how it works in your match, and then you can go from there. And it brings the support around the club, even to guys like me who would play D3. And it's a buy-in process. We've seen that you bought into our local area.
Yeah, I think also,
so it's really nice.
Does a really good job of it too. I think, and someone has to do with owning your own field. But I would run youth camps. The guys who don't play on that, let's say Sunday, right? Don't play on that Sunday, and let's say it's like a 4:00 game. 12:00 they're there for a youth camp for a couple hours, sort of connecting, and then they stay for the game. Sort of stuff like that, and you can have multiple games going on. If you had pitches, sort of like what Houston has, the stadium, and they have multiple pitches. You can actually host some games out there. You can, sort of connect, maybe have a youth clinic, and then it sort of all ties into the big show right there. Because the kids say, the parents say. So that's something that I would, we were trying to figure out through the Rooney Academy. Throughout maybe having practices before the game, and then the parents would show up and their kids. So stuff like that, I think, could be very beneficial.
Definitely. Houston, I think, is a good example of how they do that, because not only do they do that prior to matches, they have once the summer, or I think during the spring break of their elementary school kids, they do a 5-day rugby camp, youth camp. So all the kids who aren't going away for that spring break, you come down, you do the youth camp with the players. It's prior to their regular practices, and they schedule it so that way they cap it off with a home game. Then all the kids come to a home game, and it's a really good use of their time. Use of their resources, and getting the kids involved. So I think Houston and Seattle are definitely programs that people should model after in the way they get youth and new fans to come into the league here. So we're going to go back to some of my regularly scheduled programming here. And how do you and your teammates make practice fun? Because I know Greg has a tight ship on almost a minute-by-minute way of what you're supposed to be doing. So how do you guys make it fun?
I mean, I enjoy rugby in general. Rugby is fun. So this is the time you get I think rugby, you get to express yourself. So, stretching light. Ian Jones does a good job of that. And Mike Cullen does a good of that, of keeping it light and fun and everything. But this is professional, so you have to enjoy what you're doing. So this is probably like Butcher tells it all the time. This is the best job you're ever going to have right here. So make every situation, every practice, even if it's 20 degrees out there, you still got to make it fun. It's rugby, you get to express yourself. So I just, like I said, rugby is an expressive game. You can sort of let your game do the talking and enjoy it. So I just have fun just playing rugby in general.
Awesome. It's funny because your experience in rugby is completely different from my experience playing in college. We're a Division IV team up in Massachusetts. And we did play in the freezing cold. So 9 times out of 10, we had to keep a little drink on the sideline during practice. So that always made it a little interesting if somebody hit the bottle a little too hard during practice. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe this is an individual player answer. Maybe some guys would have a different answer. But do you think it helps you prepare and focus on what's going on in practice, knowing that you don't have to worry about what's going to happen next, meaning the schedule is you're stretching for 10 minutes, then you're running individuals for 20 minutes, then you're running in your groups for whatever, another 10 minutes, and knowing that in between that there's subsets of you're going to do this in your groups, this in your individuals, because you don't have to think about it. Do you think you get a better practice out of it?
Yeah, I think we already know what's going on. We know it just makes you focus on the situation. If we're just doing a kick battle, if we're just doing scrums, or if we're just working in, maybe lineouts, or we're just working our shape, we know what attention detail we have to have and where we have to have it. So it gets that mindset right. And I think it just prepares you better for practice, just like the same thing off like a test, what things are going to come your way. Are you going to be prepared? Or you don't know exactly what type of questions are going to happen. Just like if you're attacking, you don't know what the defense is going to show you, but you're going to be prepared because you know sort of what the subject is going to be about. So I think that just makes it everything. Everyone knows. All right, we're going to be out here for 75 minutes. That's it. We don't need we've all been in those practices where we're doing some type of kickoff or some type of drill. It's like one more. I think we can get in a coaching philosophy. You can get sort of off track by doing one more. It puts the onus on the players. Like, hey, in games, it's not always going to be the last one's going to be perfect. That's not realistic. I think that does a good job on the players. Like, if you want to have a good session, we're only having X amount of reps. You got to complete an X amount of reps, and if it's the last one's bad, then there we go. You got to leave on it. Next time we have to be prepared to execute. So I think that's having a plan is always great.
Awesome. So we're coming up to the last couple questions here. So I'm not sure if you have pre-match butterflies, but is there anything besides the music or going through your notes if you're feeling that those butterflies in your stomach that you do to kind of calm them a little bit?
I do. I mean, I think who said that? Maybe Tiger Woods said it, that if you don't have pre-match butterflies, then it doesn't really mean anything. So of course, like if before the kickoff or anything, you want to have the pre-match butterflies. I'm just breathing. Just remember my role, remember why I'm there, and I think not to remind myself. Don't be afraid to make the big play. I think guys, sort of sometimes don't want to make the big play out there, especially, a lot of times in my Rooney career, I had a transition, go to the bench and coming off the bench. That's a totally different mindset than it started. So you can't get hyped up in the beginning of the game as much. You get hyped up during warm up, help the guys warm up, yourself warm up, but you're sitting for the next, 50, 60 minutes. So you have to be ready and you have to know yourself and know your role and know when, take your shot to make that big play.
So is that the mindset you had when you went to Houston and effectively won the match?
I mean,
is that...
I just sort of, I think that's scouting the opponent too. I sort of know, and that's sort of the mindset. We have a mindset, just the line speed, but I sort of knew the guy I saw, from the sidelines. You got to be paying attention to the match and sort of understanding what's coming out. That's your coming off the bench is totally different responsibility. So I think guys, I wasn't. If I failed, then I failed. I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking like, all right, I'm in the system. I can do it. Like it's there. Take it, and that's what I sort of did. I think sometimes, maybe that's just experience, but maybe in later in my career, I wouldn't want to make the mistake because potentially guys think, especially in that environment, if I make a mistake, then they think the consequences. They think maybe I won't get playing time, But you don't think about the failure, you think about the success, and you trust your own. If you put in the time and the preparation, you trust your own knowledge, preparation, your own reads. And then that's how you can make the play. But yeah, that's just based on instinct. I pride myself. If a team needs a play and we needed a play, then that's what I'm gonna do if it's in the system.
I think it's your instinct, and when I don't think you realize it at the time, but you have an innate feeling of where you are on the field. And I think it's one of those things, it's a risk versus reward. If you didn't make the play, they weren't going to go all the way down the field on you. Guys were going to catch them. So you could make the mistake of trying to make that play, blow it, and you would still have the safety net of some guys versus if Dev was on the inside of your own 22. So I think it's one of those things where it's instinct. You kind of knew in the back of your head, I could take this chance. They're not ready for it. And obviously, if you make the play, it's going to be a big one. And if you don't, it's not necessarily going to set you back, in the worst terms, which is one of those things I said about Ben Foden's big. Everybody talks about Ben Foden in the first match. And, the coaches always tell you, never let the kick bounce. And I'm like, yeah, but how many of you guys have played over in that field in Las Vegas? Because I would have let every kick bounce at that point. And it was just a bad bounce. Everybody I've talked to, nobody's ever seen on a second bounce hitting the post and coming back into somebody's hands. Yeah, so I think it was just I think Ben took his calculated risk, and that 1% of it failing popped up on him, and that was just, again, I think it was instinct. I don't think it was a bad play read. I just think sometimes the ball doesn't go your way. And in your case, the ball went right your way, and then Marcus Walsh went in and sealed the deal for you.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this, and we're screaming our heads off.
I kid around Marcus, how I set him up last year in Austin. He just always with the tries. He owes me.
He's and he's another one where I think his instinct kicks in as soon as we get that Rooney gets the ball after a turnover. His instinct is to look for that little sliver because he is a slight guy to get through, and he figures if I can make one or two guys miss, I can reset the ball where I want it. And I think his instinct has matured now that he has gotten more playing time. And your instinct has definitely matured as you've gotten more playing time. So I'm glad that you guys, the younger guys, are getting in. Honestly, I think you could make a good 8-man. That's just me. I think they could throw you in. You're very a versatile person on the rugby pitch in my mind. And I mean, let's be honest. We had Basta back there at center, so I mean, technically you could play center. You had a couple LBs under him. So, and then we're just going to my last question. I think this is a great question for professional athletes. Should be asked this question every time they get interviewed. How does being an athlete make you a better person?
Athlete makes you a better person. Makes you think more about the team. I think you start with the golden rule. You treat everybody with respect how you'd like to be treated, and sort of realizing, not everyone is going to be, as you transition, it's different phases. That's a hard question to say because, a lot of us, I think in this Rooney environment, whether in high school or college, you're the best player on your team. And then when you go to, professional, that's always not going to be the case. And some people from the outside don't really understand that, but not all the time you're going to be the superstar. So what can you do to help the team? Your ego is not bigger than the team. So if the team needs to do something that week that's different, then you need to step aside because, your personal outcome is not bigger than the team. So I think that I realize as a teamwork environment that you need to have that maturity and mindset, be like, all right, what if this is the best portion of the team, then what, I need to follow that. Why am I here? Personally, winning is the most important thing for me. I love to win. I really hate to lose. But the best thing, for the team is for a matchup for me to do this role or whatever, San Diego's putting, a flanker role, then that's what I need to do. The best, I trust my captain. I trust my coaches. That's the best thing I'm going to do, even though that's not your primary position. So I think realizing that, no one's bigger than the team. You have to be, you need to put your ego aside. Your ego is not your amigo. So I think that's sort of, the mindset I sort of have. And I think that can transition, other players, because all you're thinking about, I think it's just American mindset in general, what's your stats? What is it, how many touchdowns, how many rushing, did you get, there's more things to that in the game. And I think particularly rugby that you can't quantify as stats. You're doing your job. So I think there's a lot of things about doing your job and being a teammate that take you far away as becoming a professional athlete.
Well, I think, in my opinion, Nate Brinkley was the MVP of the league this year for the simple fact that I think he was in on offensive and defensive side of the ball, something like 90% of the breakdowns. I think he was either second or third in tackles in the league, or he might have led at one point. And just the simple fact that I think he played every match, every single minute as a lock. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, that kind of stuff, that's what you want to show youth children this is how you're supposed to play. Because he has these different things he could do as far as being a jumper, which is really God given. You're given the height. Him, Matt Workin, Trevor Cassidy, Alex Mack. I'm not blessed with that height. So being given the height, working on that as far as working on the set piece for that, and then being able to say my conditioning is so well, my conditioning has been worked on so well that I can help the team in a way of just being a stabilizing force on there. I mean, talk about working out for the team. I mean, you guys had it. You had Rob. Let's see. I want to say you played multiple positions. Rob played multiple positions, and this is only going through 5 matches. Butcher played hooker and 8-man at one point. You had Basta playing center and 8-man. You had Nate going from the flank over back to the inside, which I always felt is his natural position, but I know he's an older guy, so flank is a little bit easier on him.
Assumption played a little lock.
Yeah, Assumption played a little lock as well when Trevor and Alex went down. So I think the forwards have more of an opportunity to do that because there's the size differences aren't as dramatic and their skill sets aren't as dramatically different for some positions. But you could see that when they threw somebody in, you didn't hear anybody complaining. You didn't hear Basta complain, "Oh, you're going to take me out of the back line." He went in at number 8. Him and Marcus, I think, worked particularly well in the last 4 matches together. And I think when one of them had an indecision, like if Marcus couldn't decide whether he was going to pick it or take it, Basta would pick it. And if Basta was looking at the ball and saying, "I don't know if I should pick it," Marcus would pick it and take it and do what he did. Yeah. And I think that symbiotic relationship with everybody is what the MLR is about, what Rooney is about in particular. And I love the fact that we have guys like you, we have guys like Will Burke, younger guys who are coming up who are really putting a professional stamp on this sport in this country, which we haven't seen. And then you still have the old horses. You have Nate Brakely. Hanko came in and did his crazy Hanko things. And I think it's as a fan, it warms my heart to know that there's a next set of guys coming up to do this, whether it's the national track on 15s or 7s, whether it's sticking in the MLR, or maybe, honestly, I think there's an opportunity for you to go outside the MLR at some point in the next couple of years as you build on your current resume here. So I just like to thank you so much. Congratulations again on your nuptials. You're never going to forget. You had your quarantine wedding and it was awesome. Is there anything else you want to say to the fans?
No, I really just appreciate everyone who shows the sport. It really does mean a lot to us. We appreciate just, you get involved in rugby. There's a lot, we do see a lot of work that the fans are trying to get into and support it. So us as the players, we really appreciate it. If you see us stop by, we'll welcome you. We'll talk to you and we want to connect with you. So we really appreciate it. And we appreciate the Rooster Boosters, definitely.
All right. Thanks, Mike. And I'll see you soon. All right.
All right. Thanks, Scott.